we may never see something like that ever again, or maybe like in 20 years. But it's just so rare to find.
Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my co-host Patrick Mooney. We are your Cubs beat writers at The Athletic. Patrick, last night we saw the return of Javier Báez to Wrigley Field, I should say, and it was not the Javi we have grown accustomed to. I mean, we all know that. We've all seen Javi Báez play recently, seen the highlights at minimum on Twitter, lowlights if you want to call them that. First of all, I just want to start with what Javi meant to the Cubs before we get to how he looked on Tuesday night. Javi was a joy to watch. One of those players that makes the kid come out in you and kind of just giggle with joy, right? Because the things he pulled off on the field were amazing. Even was it 2020 or 2021 the Pirates play? I know we weren't on the road for that, but whenever it was, whether it was 20 or 21, it was one of those seasons where we weren't traveling as much. And he just pulled off that insane play where I believe Wilson Contreras scored from third, and it was a ground ball to like first base. He should have been out easily, and because he's Javi Báez, he made that player, I believe it was Will Craig, his brain kind of falter. It
was Will Craig in 21. You're right.
Yeah. And that poor guy, Will Craig, who will forever be known for that play. Just the type of play, like, what is happening? Why would a player do that? It's because Javi Báez makes your brain short circuit. And the home run against San Francisco, just his entire playoff run. I always envision him like catching his gum in midair in the dugout and then pointing to the camera. In I believe that was 16. That 16 playoff run was just like, this guy's a showman. This guy steps up in the biggest moments. Like, this is cool to watch. And that's how, we can touch on what happened Tuesday night, but that's how I choose to remember Javi Báez.
Yeah, I think it was one of those weird things where you and I chatted before the game, doing our kind of coverage plan, and Javi's old news, I feel like we had written so much on the El Mago phenomenon that, right. And probably Cody in Detroit has written a lot about his decline in Detroit, and that it had been, 3 years since he got traded, that it was just kind of like, what are we doing here? But it also felt like we had to address it somewhere, right? Like it had, like right. His return just had to write, and our place at The Athletic, our bosses are really good at not doing stuff out of like obligation or eyewash. But it was just this weird kind of, the Tigers are not good. Javi is not playing well. The Cubs are not exactly killing it. Dansby has been an adequate replacement, but not like the guy or the man this year. I mean, Javi would probably be like a third string shortstop on the Cubs right now behind Nico, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And, it's just seeing his numbers it's disorienting. Just think of a guy who, look, we all knew he had gone through these extremes, these highs and lows. But you would think that his natural athleticism, his instincts would give him a little more leeway here, and that he could age maybe a little more gracefully. I mean, you think about the guys he's compared to over time, like Roberto Alomar, Gary Sheffield, Manny Ramirez, that there would just be more there to work with. And, it was classic Javi in the sense of he was supposed to meet with the media right when the clubhouse opened, and then it was kind of pushed back to BP, but he did sit for I think it was about 15, 20 minutes and answered a bunch of questions. And no, he's not someone who has any regrets. I mean, he's got $140 million reasons to be pretty happy with his decision. Got to give him credit, I would say, for not being bitter about how his contract extension talks were derailed by the pandemic. I think there was very much momentum on both sides there to get something done. It was right in that kind of deal zone in spring training there of, early March, and you could figure there could probably be a couple more back and forth to get something wrapped up before opening day 2020. Obviously, the world changed, baseball economics shifted, and, the Cubs kind of played it out. And I thought Jed Hoyer said it well of, there are guys who are in the Hall of Fame who have statues outside Wrigley Field, but taken together, that group, meaning Javi, Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, have every bit the same impact, if not more, on the city of Chicago and the Cubs' greatest moment in franchise history.
So he went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts yesterday, right? And that's not good, obviously. I just happened to look at these numbers this morning. I don't want to bury the dude, but he swung at 0 pitches in the zone. 0. He swung 9 times, swung and missed 8 times, swung at 8 sweepers, swung and missed 7 times at those. Fouled the ball off once. That's the only time he made contact. It like he didn't see a pitch in the zone. Like he didn't swing at a pitch in the zone.
Yeah.
Like he's not. Wow. It's just, it was one of those things where, like I looked at the reporter next to me at one of the swings, and I just was like, we just kind of like looked at each other and shook our heads, like what has happened? And it wasn't fun to watch him, swing like that and look like that. It was one of those returns where it was nice that he got the standing ovations. Like, I'm glad he had all those moments, but watching him play was rough. I will say the defense is still there, right? Like there was, or at least the arm. There was a play where it was a simple play, right? But like it looked like Bellinger was going to beat out an infield hit, and Javi's arm just made sure easy out. He fired it. Like I saw him field it, and I was like, is Bellinger going to beat this out? And he just fired it to first because his arm's still a cannon. So there's that. But it was tough to watch him play just because of who he was in this city. But that's the reality of baseball, I guess. And he was someone that scouts would say this of, like, it could go quickly with him. He never developed that like patience at the plate or like a really great pitch recognition. It was kind of just a concentrated 4 or 5 years of special play, and it disappeared, and it looks like it's gone now. But I don't want to dwell on ripping him. Like it doesn't feel like it's a worthwhile endeavor or fair to focus on all the negative of Javier Báez.
It did take you back, right? Like watching that tribute video. The Cubs are excellent at those thank you videos because they have great material to work with. And I think just mentally kind of running through the catalog of like, oh yeah, we were there for that, or oh, remember that one. Maybe they showed the only part of it. But that basket home run in game 1 of the 2016 playoffs, like totally set the course for that playoff run and his emergence as not just like a baseball star, but just a player who, you saw it. Just how the way kids gravitated towards him and the way like the Báez jerseys popped up everywhere and how like Be Like Javi became a thing. Like, I don't think that's something we may never see something like that ever again, or maybe like in 20 years, but it's just so rare to find a player who transcends things like that. When we were growing up, like Bo Jackson, but doing it in 2 different sports, but there aren't many baseball players who bring that level of style and entertainment to the ballpark every day. That feeling of like, what's Javi gonna do next, and just the way even major league players would kind of look at him like, dude, I don't know how he does it or where he comes up with this stuff just to have like millionaire ball players in awe of you, and like to have no clue like where you're gonna be or what you're gonna do, or to like the way him and Rizzo would just mess with each other on like pop-ups, during the playoffs, and how they would, Jed sort of alluded to it last night of how there would be times in those big games where he would just be so like casual making a play, and it would just be like, sweating up in the box, and Javi would just kind of do one of his kind of, flick the ball or just kind of casually catch it and make the play. And just was an unbelievable talent that is clearly, it's clearly faded. And I think the next time we'll probably write about him will be whenever the Tigers release him.
Big shout out to America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh, for helping us eat good during this busy time of the year for us. With HelloFresh, you get pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. It's home cooking made easy, fun, and affordable.
HelloFresh makes it easy, even for picky eaters like Scott. There's a changing menu of 50 recipes to choose from each week. Customize it to fit your taste. There's protein and veggie swap options too. The recipes are easy to follow. Just choose your delivery day, open your box, cook, and eat.
My house is busy with sports, but family dinners are important. My fam eats better, healthier, and we cook so much easier with HelloFresh.
And for a limited time, kids eat free. Go to HelloFresh.com/FTKids to unlock this exclusive offer. 1 free kids meal per box for 2 months while subscription is active. That's free kids meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/FTKids.
Right. Yeah. And it's probably a good thing that, Cubs fans didn't have to watch this version of him, daily. That they get those good memories, and they get to appreciate who he was at his best. And I think that's a good thing. It's good to have those baseball memories, and it was a pleasure to cover someone like that, because you're right. It was like there were so many times when I had a plan, and then he would just do something. Yes. It would just be, and I was like, well, I got to write about that, and it's like, yeah, I know I've written about Javi, a dozen times already this season, but got to write about that one. Like that's what the fans are going to want to read about. And he'd change your plans, and it would just be like something like seemingly simple, but it would be the aesthetically, like just watching it happen was like, wow, that was beautiful to watch, and I cannot believe he pulled it off. And you'd have to ask people about it and write about it and somehow explain something that just you had to see to really witness, to really appreciate, right?
I mean, that Pirates play was a good example, and there were just so many of those. To your point, Sahadev, of like, you've got your plan, and then something like, oh wait, what was that slide or whatever? Yeah. And it would immediately go viral, between instant replay and social media. He was the perfect guy for that window. But even in the biggest games of his life, it got to that point in 2016 where you almost had to like expect a Javi headline almost every game. Like he was going to do something that had to be written about.
Right. And yeah, absolutely. So the Cubs did win last night, 3-1. They did what they need to do. They need to continue to win before we get back into talk. They are a second place team, Patrick. they're a second place team. But there's a lot more work before we start talking about anything regarding the playoffs. Their bullpen again was dominant. It's been pretty damn good since June 1st. This comes on the heels of them releasing Héctor Neris. It was kind of a surprise that this happened at this point. They called up Jack Neely, who is not related to Cam Neely.
Did you ask him that when you went up to him?
I didn't ask him. Okay.
He's a big dude with a great mustache.
Yeah,
he can confirm that.
Yes, that is true. We'll see how he performs. I don't know, Patrick. This came. I wasn't. I'm not surprised this happened at some point in this final stretch. I was a little surprised it came right now. But Neris had been. I know fans are going to remember all the stress he provided. Right, like it was never easy with him. The overall numbers since about like the middle of whatever that was, June or I can't remember the exact date. It was after the Tampa Bay series. They were good. They were pretty solid. If those were his season numbers, there would be no chance that you'd make a move like this. Those weren't his season numbers. And even during that time, he was getting hit hard. And he's a tightrope act every single time he's out there. And the reality was, I didn't realize this. Look, there's more to this than just the performance on the field, right? I'll touch on that in a second, but he was like, even during this hottest stretch, like from June 1st on, like when the bullpen's been dominant, current guys in the bullpen, I'm talking about guys that are still there, that are in this bullpen, he was like 7th in ERA. Like, that's how good this bullpen has been. It's a deep group. I don't think anyone ever felt truly comfortable with Héctor Neris out there. And yes, was Craig Counsell putting him out there in big moments? Absolutely. I would go look at the players, especially lately, he was facing. He was not facing the heart of the order, even against Toronto. Did he ever face Vlad Jr.? No, that was usually Porter Hodge in big moments. I think sometimes people focus on the 9th inning. He wasn't always facing the heart of the order. He was facing the bottom of the order oftentimes when he came in the 9th inning. Counsell was trying to get his best relievers against the best players. But he still had Neris in big situations because, I mean, he can handle that moment in a sense. But this wasn't working. Obviously, there's more to this with his option and them getting out from under that. It won't vest, or it would have become a player option if he got to 60 appearances. 14 appearances short would have been pretty tough to get there, but it was if they had continued to use him like they had, it would have been 59.
And there's also the games finished component and finishing the season healthy, which he's been amazingly
always
throughout his career. So I mean, it looks shady. Like, it's not something that I think you can be like, oh, give the Cubs a ton of credit on this one. It's a little icky, just, for a guy that you targeted for his leadership abilities, a guy who's kind of revered by some of those young players in the clubhouse, guy who's accomplished a lot in this game. It's something that I think the MLBPA would certainly review. I don't know how much there is there, though. When you look at any of the kind of under the hood numbers here, and also just kind of that eye test or, gut feel you're talking about there of they didn't feel comfortable when he was on the mound, and there would be almost any other reliever on the current roster, they felt better than in almost any situation. And so I think we'd expect him to latch on to a contending team. I mean, everyone always needs bullpen help. You kind of get him in your organization for basically nothing. He has pitched in the biggest games. He's got a World Series ring. He's going to be a good dude when he walks in. And maybe it's just as simple as that, of just finding him a good landing spot and moving on and kind of forgetting about it. But it will be interesting to see how much or how little they continue to either shed veteran players or just look harder or try harder to create opportunities for young guys in the last month plus of the season.
Yeah, that certainly will be something we need to watch. It doesn't seem like it's something they definitely want to do right now, but we'll see if they don't take care of business over the next 2 weeks. It could make sense. I don't know. I think it would be more on the position player side, right? Than I guess there is Jordan Wicks is going to come back soonish, maybe in a 10 days ish, or be ready to come back, right? We'll see how they maneuver that. That may not be too complicated a thing to accomplish. So we'll see on that. But there are players, obviously, that could get some burn this season. I think the two most obvious are Kevin Alcantara and Owen Casey. Didn't want playing time for these guys, right? Alcantara is already on the 40-man. Casey needs to be after the season, right? So those two are obvious. We'll see on like Ballesteros. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
You could go either way. You could say like it makes more sense to bring up Ballesteros if they're contending, right? As a lefty bat that they want and to force him onto the 40-man. So I could see the argument either way. It's like, oh no, they're out of it. Call them up and get him as much playing time. We'll see how that plays out. I think it's interesting just how good this bullpen looks. And I think now looking at it, like I really took a look at it. Yes, I know there's been individual performances. Porter Hodge has been great. Jorge Lopez has I'm just like watching him pitch and then seeing this stuff. Sometimes I'm just like, wait, this guy was released. I understand that was a complicated situation with the Mets, but wow, what this guy isn't just like a situational reliever for this team. Like he's throwing 97 with good breaking stuff and pitching the 8th or 9th inning. And he'll come in against their best. Like two of their key relievers were picked up off the scrap heap in Lopez and Tyson Miller. And Miller's like their fireman, essentially. You get a runner on or a runner or two on, and there's a righty coming up, call Tyson Miller in. This bullpen looks really good. And I know people are going to look at the save stats, the blown save stats, and say it's an issue. Listen, it was an issue for April and May. And there were moments even in June and July where it was like, oh, woof, it caused problems, but that happens in general. There will be moments. It's hard for a bullpen to be perfect, but I think it's a strength of this team suddenly. And with Hodge, I think Tyson Miller is under contract for next year, right? Almost certainly. Jorge Lopez
he's
is
under club control for a while.
Yeah. And then Jorge Lopez isn't, but I think he's done enough for them to at least be intrigued. He's very comfortable with this team. He has a history with a lot of people in the org. I'm curious if they try and bring him back. I'm missing other guys that have been really good. Drew Smiley's been great. I know he's a free agent. It's unlikely he comes back, but this bullpen is kind of set up to be, they can make some moves, add some veterans if they want to in the offseason. But there's some young guys suddenly with Hodge. I'm really curious to see what Neely does. He's got this, what they call a splider, because it's a slider that sometimes has that sometimes has arm side action. That's what his bullpen coach in Iowa, or bullpen catcher in Iowa, decided to call it, because it's a slider that moves like a splitter at times. Neely said that it sometimes moves like a traditional slider. Sometimes it suddenly has arm action. That's his go-to pitch. And I think the dude had a 52% strikeout rate at AAA with the Cubs, 6 2/3 innings, but still.
So it's a slider that doesn't know where it's going.
Yeah. It was working. That's all I know. And he throws in the mid to upper 90s with a fastball. He's a reliever, so we'll see where these young arms, they finally have some stuff too. You know what I mean? They have stuff in the bullpen. They have guys that can pitch. We'll see what it leads to, but I think that's an interesting part of the team. You have to be careful with this. You have to be careful with bullpens. We've seen guys come up, perform for 3 months, and then the next year they're nothing like that, or they get hurt, or whatever it is. But with those guys, and then Merriweather, I know he hasn't been perfect, but he's just kind of ramping back up right now. There's a lot of guys in this bullpen that you're like, okay, that you can keep them for next year, and suddenly you don't have to spend $15 million to get like the top of the market reliever. Not that they'd ever do that.
You're reading my mind, Sahadev. I was just about to jump in there and be like, what does Jed always say? The worst time to evaluate players is spring training in September. And I feel like there's very much a risk for the Cubs talking themselves into like, hey, we figured out the bullpen. And like offense might clean up against some really bad pitching staffs in September. And oh, hey, Jordan Wicks came back and made 2 starts. Like maybe he'll be just, I don't know. I have a feeling that Craig Counsell's not going to let a lot of that stand, that he will be very much reasonable and patient and willing to listen. But I think there's a huge danger in that, this like false sense of security that it sometimes feels like the Cubs create of, well, our infrastructure. Oh, I mean, we got sweepers and splitters and splinker, whatever, just like, the old, the Cubs always throw no hitters in the pitch lab. And then you got to figure out how to, make, I think our buddy Jesse Rogers mentioned this on Twitter of like, yeah, the overall numbers are pretty good, but like look at it in high leverage. Have they made the pitches when they had to? And like when you look at the amount of 1-run games they've lost, when you look at a sub 500 record, it's like no doubt they are good at that kind of process of piecing things together and on the fly. I'm not saying it's nothing. Like obviously that's good, but like there's a difference between like being competent and better than teams like, the White Sox and the Rockies. And then there's also, that doesn't make you a playoff contender. And that to me is going to be the interesting part of like, when are they going to let the kids play? Not that there's that many spots, but Neris wasn't perfect, but if the Cubs were winning and he was a little better, that's not a guy that you just get rid of, right? I mean, they have like that's kind of the nature of relievers, and I get that, but I think they would have exercised a little more caution of like,
I agree with that.
right? Of like, what if basically what happened last year? What if all of their best relievers like go down at once? You'd probably want Héctor Neris around, or you would be a little more concerned about how is this going to play in the clubhouse? And like,
right. If
Neely was so good, wouldn't he be like pitching at Yankee Stadium right now? I don't know. I do think we are going to learn a lot over these last, this last month or so. Like I think just by their actions, how people perform, how they kind of process this, will be interesting.
Yes, I agree with you. I think this isn't like full on waving the white flag, but it's a precursor. If this next,
it's kind of taking it out of the drawer and just kind of leaving the white flag out in case you want to raise it.
Yeah, it's like okay, because I mean, I do understand. Like everything you said is right about like why you wouldn't release Neris, right? If they were fully contending. But I also think like there's plenty of reasons why you would in this kind of like borderline situation, like because it's this borderline situation. Then you add in the financial component, which they'll never say is a factor, which absolutely is a factor. It makes sense. I think it's like we said before. I don't like it. I don't like that teams do this stuff, but it's the reality of it. They guaranteed they just freed up $9 million for next season, so that makes sense for them.
I wish we could show readers Jed's face when you asked, "Hey, how did Neris's potential vesting player option for next season factor into it?" It was this quick head nod, head shake, sort of a cringe, kind of his lips curled up, and then just kind of looked away for the next question. I think you got one no on the record. File away, just in case. Immediately.
It was a quick no with the head shake. Jesse Rogers does a good impersonation of it. It will, that's it's just how baseball is nowadays. It's not rare to see stuff like that. It doesn't feel good, but it is. Yeah, I think these next 6 weeks or whatever we're at now, how they handle this, what they do, it's got a lot is going to be about how they perform, right? Like I was talking to someone about this, and I was like, well, if you lose, 7 of 8 here when you should be winning, that kind of changes your thinking. And they were like, absolutely. I was like, how much, like, you guys pay attention to these playoff odds so much, but like, what happens if you win 8 in a row? And it was pointed out, well, your playoff odds go to 30% probably then. So, thinking changes. Absolutely. So yeah, this next week, these next 2 weeks, Tigers, Marlins, Pirates, Nationals, right? And then Pirates again. That's the season. That tells us how they perform on the field will tell us a lot, and then their actions as these things unfold, the front office will tell us a lot, right? And what direction they're going, what they're trying to figure out for 2025. This was a move with, I think they justify it. They justified it to us as like, I thought one of Hoyer's quotes that, it kind of got overlooked, and I get why, was this is a lot like, this move is like how they handled the deadline. Yeah, could it help for 2024? Sure,
Yeah.
probably, maybe. But it's also like, this is a move for 2025 and beyond. And Counsell said as much at one point. Neely could be better than Héctor Neris this season, right? He could be, but mainly this is to see if he can help the team in 2025 and beyond. And that's what most of these moves were. They just weren't going to make moves with 2024 solely in mind, but we'll see if they can be better for 2024. They don't instill a lot of confidence just because they can't, rattle off 8 wins in a row. They haven't done it. So I'm hesitant to be like, hey, look at this. The reality is they're playing such poor teams, and you watch these teams and you're like, yeah, okay, they can win 8 in a row, but they still haven't. They still lose 1-0 to the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, that was a crusher.
Yeah, the player of the week though in the AL. That was Bowden Francis, however his name is pronounced.
Oh
so
man, I kept Googling that guy's what's his name? Like, is he, is he a name that prospects nerds are all over that I should be aware of? And then I looked at his reference page and I was like, he's kind of been an up and down guy for a while, and just absolutely dominating the Cubs at Wrigley Field. So yeah, I mean, outside of the Yankees coming to Wrigley Field and then the Cubs going out to Dodger Stadium, those 6 games, those might be the only games that really have kind of like playoff race integrity at stake. I know they go to Philadelphia towards the end of the year, but maybe things will wrapped up by then. I mean, who knows in terms of what the Phillies would still have to play for, but that I think would be part of it too, of just, seeing what you have and making some of those decisions. And Counsell, I will say, has been pretty consistent going back, several weeks probably before the trade deadline, of saying just because you trade away a veteran player and bring up a young player does not mean you are incorporating a lesser player. That was part of his whole gray area thing, that, kind of a theme that emerged gradually over the summer, of how he feels like it's a lot more nuanced than just buyer seller. And it's not just veteran and unknown, that, he is very much willing to work with unproven young talent, and he very much has the future in mind as well. And so how that plays out, we don't know exactly. I think we will find out shortly after the season, and as we get into the off season, of like what Counsell really wants and what he really thinks of this organization. But for now, we're seeing these kind of smaller moves that, taken together, whether it's the Paredes trade, the lighter trade, the Neris goodbye, it has shown us a lot about what the Cubs and what they're thinking.
Yeah, And I'm almost more interested in that Counsell stuff you were just talking about. What kind of sort of things he's going to adjust come whatever it is, October or later. That's going to be fascinating, and I'm looking forward to breaking all that stuff down. Yeah. So the Cubs have 2 more against Detroit. We will be back for an episode for Friday, I believe, right?
We're thinking mailbag, maybe.
Yeah. We'll get some of your questions,
grievances.
Cubs fans. Airing of grievances. We'll see if it's an airing of grievances or how fans are feeling. Maybe the Cubs will finally swept the Tigers. I'm not gonna hold my breath, but we'll see where they're at and how fans are reacting. We'll take the pulse of the fan base. Thanks for listening, everyone. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe to the YouTube page. That would be great. Subscribe to The Athletic, where you can read Patrick and my work on the Cubs. We'll be back at this shortly. Thanks for listening. Take care.